actually does work. You know, people are drawn to interesting people. And if you're interested back in them, that's even sort of a better combination. Another thing Russell does is, he shares. He's very open with everything he produces, all the knowledge that he has. He gives it all away. This is another Seth Godin reference, this idea of being remarkable and doing something worthy of a remark. And this really is kind of the number one thing when it comes down to having a successful product, successful marketing. People just won't talk about things that are bland, that don't matter, that don't add value. Seth uses the analogy of, okay, we've all seen brown cows, and if you're driving through the countryside, and one day you come across a purple cow, you're going to stop, and you're going to take pictures of it, and you're going to remark about that purple cow, and you're going to tell everybody you know, holy shit, I saw a purple cow on the side of the road. And so, again, you have to know why you want to actually build a personal brand online, but if you want it to be really effective, this is really what you're going after, is doing something that really stands out. And lastly, is the hat. You have to be yourself. This whole medium that we call, we call social media, but what it comes down to is what all this does is it acts as an amplifier. I forgot who I was talking to this about. It might have been one of these Twitter conversations, but I was thinking about Bill Cosby, who had this comedy skit from probably about 20 years ago. And there's a line in it, and he's talking about, like, he doesn't understand the appeal of smoking weed. Why would someone want to do this? And someone said, well, it amplifies your personality. And he says, yes, but what if you're an asshole? So that's what social media is. You have to be conscious of the fact that if you're an asshole, it's going to be amplified across multiple networks. They'll all intersect and do all these we talk about. So be yourself and try not to be an asshole. Really is what it comes down to. And don't be fake, because within this whole medium, people can spot it fake pretty quickly. So you have to be yourself. And so as you're doing little silly things like coming up with hats and signature items or whatever it is, just the way that you provide value. And I really. My personality is more about my passion for this space, and I like to visualize things, and I freely give that away. So you have to be authentic in the way that you do things, because people will understand. They'll see your motives pretty quickly. So everybody know who this is, this guy? Okay, Gary Vaynerchuk. He talks about personal branding as sort of like a gold rush, that at some point it's going to end, and you really have to, make a push and get your claim, just like any gold rush. And, I think he's partially correct in the sense of urgency. I think what it comes down to is that, aside from social networks, everybody here Google someone they know, right? You get a pretty good snapshot of what that person's done, where they've worked, if they've written anything, their blogs come up. And so what it comes down to is that if you're going to get Googled, or even use a social search, and you're going to come up with those results, you want to kind of have some level of influence on those. And in order to do that, it kind of goes back to all those things I mentioned. You actually have to have a bit of strategy. So when it comes down to how you're presented on Facebook, or how you act on your blog, or how you're using any of these things, all these things show up. They all leave a trail, and we have to be conscious of those things. So really that's what it comes down to is, to go back to what I said earlier, a brand has a gut feeling, someone else's gut feeling about you. And you can't really control that, but you can influence it. And that's the key. So if you're just out there doing all these things and you don't have strategy and you're just kind of reacting to everything, the chances of you influencing how you come across is less effective. So that's what Brand U.0 is. If you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Yeah. So when is it right for you to kind of co-brand versus totally keeping it separate? Yes. More or less? Yeah. When you're representing the brand, I mean, you're basically, in a way, acting as a steward, right? You are representing them, and so, like, for whenever I speak, even in something like this, to some degree, I'm always cognizant of how I represent my company. This particular one is a little bit more on my own time, and so I can take a little bit more leeway with it. If it's a professional event, it's always, I work for critical mass first and foremost, kind of start there. So you have to have a bit of a strategy. Now, on my blog, I say, kind of disclaimer, personal blog, right? And then when I write for my company's blog, it's a company material. But there's always going to be some type of connection, and it depends on sort of the level of your profile and how visible you are. So I think you really have to just basically come up with your strategy and figure out what you want to sort of separate and where do they kind of work together. And then once you figure out, okay, if I'm blogging for my company or I'm representing them or I'm Twittering on their behalf, how am I going to do that? And then that gets into transparency, which is probably the number one thing, is how transparent you can be about it. But you have to decide for yourself, what is your strategy? Like, where are you going to keep it personal? Like, on my blog, it's kind of like, there's mentions of the company and I'm transparent about it, but I consider that to be my place. Does that help?
So there's always a conversation about brands participating in social networks. Should they participate as brands, or should they participate as individuals? Or would people rather see? And I feel like there's people that come down on either side of the issue sometimes when they make good arguments. Let's say you work at, I don't know if you work at Dunkin' Donuts, like Dunkin' Donuts is on Twitter, or Starbucks. And they are the brand, but then they also people they act in a personable manner, but there are some brands that are definitely brands. There's not really a personality there.
Yeah.
There's I know how I feel. How do you feel?
I think I came up with a new word. Brandividuals. Which I'll actually, I think if I were to bet 3 to 4 years from now, probably the more successful examples will be individuals representing a brand, and whether it's the logo that you see in the avatar, you're going to know who that person is. It's not just going to be blank. You never know who the person is behind it. If I had to put my money on it, I would say that the successful ones, you're going to know who that person is behind it, and the really successful ones are going to figure out, when that person leaves the company, how they're going to deal with it, how they replace it. That came up today at Blogwell, actually, for Home Depot. Yeah, Home Depot. Because the person who kickstarted off their Twitter, has a pretty good following, and people are loyal, and if she leaves, she is that, but long term they'll have that figured out. And if she does leave, then another personality needs to come and take that. So I'm kind of but you see, some people will say no, brand shouldn't be on it, and I'm kind of thinking no, it's going to be a combination of, it's just not going to be the way it's been done in the past. It used to be just Coke, and you never knew about the people who work behind Coke, and now it could be Coke, and it's John who works for Coke, and he's going to help you do something. I don't know. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts or particular strategies for how to manage your personal brand when you're going through either a professional or, really my question is about going through a life change, a significant life change? Like, my question is because I'm leaving corporate life to become a stay-at-home mother.
Okay.
So I still have, all this experience as a worker.
Right.
But I don't really want to continue that as my brand anymore. So how do I manage this transition?
You have just more flexibility. I think if you are like myself, I think I've taken a lot of liberties with it, but you always have to be more conscious when you're in the corporate world, because you're always going to have coworkers kind of, if you start to build this, they're kind of like, wait, are you representing us? That question always comes up, and it becomes a delicate dance. Your dance is less delicate. You can kind of do whatever you want. In this presentation, you should